My name is Sophie Bennett, and for 10 years, I thought I had it all. A thriving business. A picture-perfect marriage. A future that seemed secure. My husband, Mark, and I built our home renovation company from the ground up. We started small, just the two of us and a rented van, but within a few years, we had 20 employees, a steady stream of clients, and a reputation as one of the best in town. People used to say we were the dream team. They were wrong. The cracks started small. Late nights at the office. Strange phone calls he'd take outside. A distance I couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. And then came the bombshell. He was having an affair with our operations manager, Jessica. And worse? They weren't just in love. They had a plan. I'll never forget the day he sat me down, papers in hand, and said, "Sophie, you're great at the creative stuff. But Jess and we're better at running things. It's time for you to step back. Step back. From the company I built. From the life I sacrificed for." He smiled, calm and cold, like he was doing me a favor. I was too stunned to speak. Too crushed to fight. At least, at first. Within weeks, they maneuvered me out completely, bought out my shares for a fraction of their worth, pushed me out of the office, and made sure everyone knew I was taking a break. A break. What a joke. I lost my business. I lost my marriage. And for a while, I thought I'd lost myself. But what Mark and Jessica didn't understand was this. You can steal a company. You can steal a title. But you can't steal grit. And mine? Was just getting started. At first, I thought I could fight it. I hired a lawyer, pulled out old contracts, scoured every document we'd ever signed. I was ready for battle. I wanted justice. I wanted the truth to matter. But the truth is messy. And business? Even messier. Mark and Jessica had planned everything too well. They'd shifted assets, rewrote agreements behind my back, and made sure every legal angle was covered long before I even knew what was happening. In court, my case fell apart piece by painful piece. Every argument my lawyer made? They had a counter. Every fact I presented? They twisted. And the worst part? Most of the people we worked with, the team I thought were friends, stood by them. Loyal to the paychecks, not to me. The final ruling was brutal. I got nothing. No shares. No payout worth mentioning. Not even my name on the brand I had helped build. Just erased. Walking out of that courtroom felt like stepping into a black hole. I remember gripping my lawyer's arm, my legs shaking so badly I could barely walk. "It's over," he said gently. But it didn't feel gentle. It felt like I was being buried alive. The weeks that followed were a blur. I barely left my apartment. I ignored texts from friends who didn't know what to say. I sat in silence, staring at the walls, replaying every conversation, every mistake, every sign I had missed. How had I been so blind? How had I trusted so completely? And most painful of all, who was I now? Without the company. Without the marriage. Without the identity I'd spent a decade building. One night, around 3 a.m., I stood in my tiny kitchen, clutching a cup of cold tea, and whispered to the empty room. "Is this it?" Silence answered. A hollow, deafening silence. But beneath the silence, somewhere deep down, a spark refused to die. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But something inside me whispered. This isn't the end. Not yet. The days blurred into weeks. Every morning, I woke up with that same sick feeling in my stomach, like the world had tilted sideways and left me stranded. I went through the motions. Made coffee. Scrolled aimlessly through my phone. Watched the hours slip by like water through my fingers. Friends checked in at first, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, remember that company I poured my heart into? It's gone now. No thanks. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the floor of my living room, surrounded by old notebooks, sketches, plans, ideas I'd once been so proud of. I flipped through them numbly, fingers tracing the pages like I was touching the ghost of my old life. And then I stopped. On one page, scrawled in the margin of a dusty notebook, was a tiny idea I'd forgotten about. A concept for a niche renovation service, something fresh, something none of our competitors had ever tried. My heart gave a tiny, unexpected thud. For a second, I almost laughed. What was the point? I had no money. No team. No reputation left. But the idea wouldn't let go. It flickered in the back of my mind all night, stubborn and bright. And for the first time in months, I felt something. Not hope exactly, but a challenge. The next morning, I did something small but monumental. I cleared off my dusty kitchen table, grabbed a pen, and started sketching out a rough plan. No investors. No fancy office. Just me and my stubborn determination. It wasn't much. But it was a start. And right then, that was enough. The first step was terrifying. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a blank spreadsheet, wondering how I'd lost everything, and still had the nerve to try again. But that stubborn spark inside me? It refused to die. I listed every skill I had. Every contact I could reach out to. Every tiny resource I could scrape together. It wasn't much. But it was enough to build something. I called in favors from old suppliers, ones who hadn't taken sides when everything fell apart. I set up a free website using a basic template. I spent nights designing flyers by hand, too broke to hire a graphic designer. And when I wasn't working? I was walking the streets of my city, knocking on doors, pitching myself like I had nothing to lose. Because honestly, I didn't. One afternoon, standing in a dusty warehouse talking to a skeptical property manager, I felt it. That old fire. The one I thought Mark and Jessica had killed. It was still there. Smaller now, but fierce. The manager squinted at me. You sure you're ready for this? I smiled, steady and calm. No. But I'm doing it anyway. The first client came from a Facebook group. A tiny project. Barely worth the money. But when I finished the job, they left a review that made my chest ache with pride. Sophie's attention to detail is unmatched. Professional, creative, and a joy to work with. It wasn't much. But it was proof. That night, I sat alone at my table, staring at the glowing review, tears streaming down my face. Not because I was sad. But because for the first time in months, I felt like me again. The girl who didn't quit. The woman who builds. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. Momentum is a funny thing. Once it starts, it grows faster than you expect. After that first glowing review, I picked up another small project. Then another. Each one a little bigger than the last. Before I knew it, I was juggling 3 clients at once, something I hadn't imagined possible just weeks earlier. My phone, once painfully silent, started buzzing at all hours. Referrals. Inquiries. Even an old client from my past life, cautiously reaching out to see if I was available. I smiled when I saw their name. Yes, I was available. More than that, I was ready. I brought on a part-time assistant, Emma, a single mom with a sharp mind and unstoppable energy. We worked side by side in my tiny rented office, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, but always moving forward. The money? Still tight. The hours? Brutal. But every day, I woke up with purpose. And that alone made everything feel different. One Friday night, long after Emma had gone home, I sat alone scrolling through our growing list of projects. My eyes burned from exhaustion, my shoulders ached, but my heart? My heart felt alive. I thought back to Mark and Jessica, to the smug looks on their faces when they took everything from me. And for the first time, instead of feeling rage, I felt gratitude. Because without their betrayal, I never would have discovered this version of me. The version who fights, who builds, who refuses to quit. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and whispered into the quiet. We're just getting started. And deep down, I knew it was true. The email hit my inbox on a quiet Tuesday morning. Subject: Project Inquiry, Metro Developments. I blinked, rereading it twice. Metro Developments was huge, a company I'd dreamed of working with back in the old days, but never dared to pitch. And now? They were reaching out to me. My hand shook as I clicked it open. We've heard great things about your work. Would you be available to discuss a major renovation project next week? I sat back, heart racing. This was it. The big leagues. The following days were a blur of prep, researching everything about Metro, perfecting my pitch, running mock presentations with Emma until we both collapsed from exhaustion. I kept telling myself I was ready. But deep down, I was terrified. Could I handle this? Was I really strong enough to play at this level? Every doubt I'd ever buried came roaring back. The day of the meeting, I stood outside their skyscraper headquarters, staring up at the glass walls gleaming in the sun. 10 floors above me, decisions were being made that could change my entire future. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "You belong here." Then I stepped inside. The pitch room was massive, the air humming with quiet tension. I delivered my presentation with every ounce of passion I had. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. And when I finished, Metro's director leaned forward, eyes sharp. "That was bold," she said. "Exactly what we're looking for." Walking out of that building, I felt taller than I had in my entire life. Emma texted before I even reached the sidewalk. "How'd it go?" I smiled at my screen. "We nailed it." That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something powerful. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke. This was the result of every sleepless night, every heartbreak, every moment I refused to give up. And whatever came next? I was ready. The Metro deal changed everything. Within weeks, my small agency was suddenly flooded with calls, emails, and new opportunities. Clients who once wouldn't give me the time of day were now chasing me. Emma and I worked around the clock, barely keeping up. We hired 2 more team members. We moved into a bigger office. And still, the work kept coming. One afternoon, as I was reviewing proposals, Emma poked her head into my office. "You might want to see this," she said, holding up her phone. I took it, and froze. It was a news article. Bennett and Company. Facing financial trouble after series of cancelled projects. Bennett and Company. Mark and Jessica's company. I read the article twice, my pulse quickening. Apparently, a few key clients had pulled out. Rumors of internal conflict were swirling. And, most shocking of all, the company was losing its grip on market share. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So, the cracks were showing. And I hadn't even lifted a finger. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about all those nights I cried over what they took from me. All those hours I spent questioning my worth. And now? The universe was doing what I never had to. Balancing the scales. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Not yet. Because while they were falling, I was still rising. And my biggest move? Was just around the corner. It came out of nowhere. An email from a broker I barely knew. Bennett and Company is seeking buyers. Are you interested in discussing a potential acquisition? I stared at the screen, hardly breathing. For a moment, I thought it was a prank. A cruel joke. But no. It was real. Mark and Jessica's empire, the one they'd stolen from me, was crumbling. And now? They were desperate to sell. I forwarded the email to my lawyer with a simple note. Get me the details. Fast. Then I sat back, heart racing, a slow smile spreading across my face. This was it. The moment I never thought would come. The next few days were a blur of calls, meetings, and paperwork. Behind the scenes, I stayed quiet, letting my legal team handle everything. I didn't want Mark or Jessica to know who was behind the deal. Not yet. Finally, the offer was ready. Clean. Sharp. And, thanks to their desperation, far lower than the company had once been worth. My lawyer looked at me across the table. Are you sure? She asked. This is personal. I met her gaze, steady. Yes. But it's also smart. Because for me? This wasn't just business. It was closure. I hit send on the offer and leaned back, staring at the city skyline. One way or another, everything was about to change. And this time, I was in control. The closing was set for Friday morning. I walked into the familiar office building, heart pounding, head high. Same marble floors. Same polished doors. But this time everything was different. This time I owned it. In the conference room, Mark and Jessica were already seated. Mark looked up, his face draining of color. Jessica's jaw tightened, eyes flashing with disbelief. Sophie? Mark said, voice brittle. What are you doing here? I smiled, setting my bag down calmly. Didn't your broker tell you? I said smoothly. I'm your buyer. For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick, heavy. Jessica's hand clenched around her coffee cup. Mark looked at the papers in front of him like they might explode. This is a mistake, Jessica snapped. You can't possibly. I cut her off, voice cool and steady. I already did. I slid the signed documents across the table, meeting their stunned eyes. It's done. Mark exhaled shakily, leaning back in his chair. I don't understand. Why? I stood, gathering my things. Because, I said, pausing at the door, there's nothing sweeter than reclaiming what was stolen. I looked over my shoulder, eyes sharp. And watching you pack your boxes? That's just a bonus. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, a wave of pure, quiet satisfaction washed over me. 10 years of work. Years of betrayal. And now, victory. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. 6 months later, everything looked different. The office that once felt like a battlefield now buzzed with new life. We rebranded, retrained, and rebuilt. Toxic habits? Gone. Dead weight? Cut. In their place? Fresh ideas, genuine teamwork, and a culture of respect. One afternoon, standing in my new corner office, I looked out over the city skyline. Emma knocked on the door, smiling. Metro's expanding their contract again, she said. Biggest deal yet. I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. We've come a long way. She grinned. And it's only the beginning. That night, sitting alone with a glass of wine, I thought back to Mark and Jessica. Not with bitterness. Not with anger. Just clarity. They had tried to break me. But instead, they built me. Stronger. Sharper. Unstoppable. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old photos, snapshots of my first tiny office, late-night brainstorms, and the review that started it all. I smiled, heart full. This wasn't just about winning. It was about becoming. And standing here now? I knew one thing for sure. I hadn't just reclaimed my company. I had reclaimed myself. As the city lights flickered outside my window, I whispered to the night. We're just getting started. And this time I believed it with every fiber of my being.